It didn't look like much. A brown plastic pouch, flat, sealed, unremarkable. But inside that simple package was something soldiers quietly depended on, something that could mean the difference between function and collapse. The MRE wasn't designed to impress. It wasn't meant to taste like home. In fact, many soldiers joked about it. Some even dreaded opening one. But they always carried it. Because in modern warfare, from Vietnam War to operations in the Middle East, the battlefield didn't wait for proper meals. There were no kitchens, no guarantees, no time, just movement, uncertainty, and long stretches where stopping, even for a few minutes, could be dangerous. That's where the MRE came in. Compact enough to fit into a pack, durable enough to survive heat, pressure, and rough handling. Each meal was engineered to provide calories, nutrients, and energy without the need for cooking. Just open, eat, keep moving. But here's what most people don't realize. The MRE wasn't just about food, it was about control. In an environment where almost everything was unpredictable, the MRE offered something rare: certainty. A soldier might not know when the next resupply would come or how long the mission would last, but he knew that inside that pouch there was at least one thing he could rely on: a meal, a moment, a small sense of stability. And in war, that mattered more than taste ever could. Because sometimes survival isn't just about staying alive, it's about having just enough energy to take the next step. At first, the reason seemed obvious: food, energy, survival. The meal ready to eat was carried because soldiers needed to eat. But that wasn't the full story. Not even close. Because in modern combat, hunger wasn't always the biggest problem. It was unpredictability. Missions could stretch for hours or days. Supply lines could break. Weather could delay everything. And in places shaped by conflicts like the Vietnam War, even finding a safe moment to eat could become a risk. So the MRE was designed to remove uncertainty. No cooking, no fire, no preparation, just open and eat, anywhere, anytime. But here's the twist. The MRE wasn't just designed to keep soldiers alive, it was designed to control how they functioned. Every component inside the pouch was carefully chosen, calories calculated, nutrients balanced. Even the chewing time mattered, because eating slowed the body, lowered stress, gave the mind a brief reset. And then there was something else, something soldiers didn't always talk about. Certain meals were known, unofficially, to slow digestion, to reduce the need for bathroom breaks during long missions. It wasn't printed on the package, it wasn't advertised, but it was understood. Because in combat, even something as simple as needing to stop could be dangerous. So the MRE became more than food. It became a tool of timing, a way to manage the body, to delay needs, to maintain movement, and to keep soldiers operating longer than they normally could. In that sense, what they carried wasn't just a meal, it was control over their own limits. Out there, survival wasn't always about bullets. Sometimes it was slower than that, quieter, harder to notice until it was too late. Fatigue, dehydration, mental drift. These were the kinds of threats that didn't explode, but still took soldiers out of the fight. And that's where the meal ready to eat quietly did its real work. Because the body doesn't fail all at once, it fades. Energy drops, focus slips, decisions take longer. And in combat, even a second of hesitation can change everything. A missed sound, a delayed reaction, a wrong step. The MRE was designed to fight that invisible decline, not just with calories, but with timing. Small components inside the package could be eaten gradually: a cracker during a pause, a spoon of peanut butter while moving, a sip of electrolyte mix when water was scarce. It allowed soldiers to feed themselves without stopping the mission, without breaking rhythm, without drawing attention. But there was something else, something less visible. Eating, no matter how small, reminded the body it was still functioning, still stable, still alive. In environments shaped by conflicts from the Vietnam War to desert operations decades later, that mattered more than people realize. Because when everything around you feels uncertain, routine becomes survival. Even if that routine is just tearing open a pouch and taking one more bite. The MRE didn't just keep soldiers moving, it kept them from fading. And sometimes that was the difference between staying in control or slowly losing it. The heat didn't just press down, it wrapped around everything. Thick, wet, unforgiving. Somewhere deep in the jungle during the Vietnam War, a small U.S. patrol had stopped moving. Not by choice, one of their men was down. Not from a gunshot, not from an explosion, but from something slower. Exhaustion. His body had reached its limit, breathing shallow, hands trembling, eyes unfocused. In a place where every sound mattered, even this kind of weakness could be dangerous. The patrol didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Everyone understood what was happening. They were far from extraction, too far to carry him quickly, too exposed to wait too long, and time was no longer on their side. One soldier dropped beside him, not a medic, just another man carrying what everyone else carried. He reached into his pack, pulled out a brown pouch, ripped it open. Inside, pieces of something ordinary. Crackers, spread, powder. The MRE. No ceremony, no delay. He pressed a piece of food into the wounded man's hand. Eat. At first, nothing. Then, slowly, a bite. Another. The body resisted, but it responded. Minutes passed. Breathing steadied, hands stopped shaking, focus returned. Just enough. Not strength, not recovery, but something in between. Enough to stand, enough to move. And in that moment, under the weight of the jungle, the MRE wasn't just a ration, it was time, bought in small pieces, measured in bites. Because sometimes history isn't shaped by weapons, but by the quiet moments when someone doesn't collapse. There's something soldiers rarely say out loud, not because it's secret, but because it's difficult to explain. In war, the body has limits, but the mind reaches them first. Long before collapse, there's doubt, a quiet voice that starts asking questions. How much longer? How far? What if I can't keep going? And in environments shaped by conflicts like the Vietnam War, those questions didn't come gently. They came when it was hot, when it was loud, when it was uncertain. That's where something as simple as the meal ready to eat, MRE, began to matter in a different way. Not as food, but as reassurance. Because opening an MRE meant something specific. It meant you're still functioning. You're still following a routine, still doing what you were trained to do, even if everything else felt out of control. That small act, tearing open plastic, taking a bite, created a moment of structure, a pause, a reset. And in high-stress environments, the brain looks for patterns to hold on to. Anything predictable, anything familiar. The MRE provided that. Same packaging, same process, same sequence. Again and again. It grounded soldiers in something real, something repeatable. But there was also a darker side to it. Some soldiers didn't eat their MRE right away. They saved it, held on to it longer than they should have. Not because they weren't hungry, but because eating it meant something else. It meant time had passed, that supplies were running low, that the mission was stretching beyond expectation. So they delayed it. as if holding on to the MRE meant holding on to control, holding on to hope, because once it was gone, there was one less certainty in an uncertain place. In that sense, the MRE wasn't just about sustaining the body, it was tied to something deeper: fear, control, time, and the fragile balance between pushing forward and realizing how close you are to your limit. At first glance, the meal ready to eat, MRE, seems simple. Calories, packaging, convenience. But its effectiveness was never just about feeding the body, it was about controlling uncertainty. In modern combat environments, from the dense terrain of the Vietnam War to later conflicts, one of the greatest threats wasn't always the enemy, it was disruption. Irregular schedules, unpredictable movement, delayed supplies. Under those conditions, even basic needs become unstable. And when those needs become unstable, so does performance. The MRE was designed to remove that instability. Every element had a purpose. The packaging protected it from water, dirt, and rough handling. The contents were rationed carefully. Calories, protein, salt, everything the body needed to keep functioning under stress. Even the flameless ration heater. The meal, ready to eat, MRE, was never meant to be remembered. It wasn't dramatic, it didn't make noise, it didn't change the outcome of battles in any visible way. Across conflicts, from the jungles of the Vietnam War to modern deployments, it remained quiet, reliable, almost invisible. But that was its strength, because survival isn't always about extraordinary moments. Sometimes it's about consistency, about removing doubt, about knowing that no matter how unpredictable everything else becomes, something stays certain. The next meal, the next source of energy, the next small step forward. In war, that kind of certainty is rare, and when it exists, it matters more than people realize. The lesson isn't about food, it's about stability, about how even the simplest systems, when designed well, can hold a person together under pressure. Because in the end, survival doesn't always depend on what you fight with. Sometimes it depends on what you carry quietly.